The Flea Market Fan Club, or Captain Brimm and Oscar D. Doggety, by Don Beasley. Copyright 2012, Don Beasley, read by Don Beasley. Most flea markets are temporary. They take place in a field or a park and have many different people selling many different things. Captain Brimm's phenomenal flea market was not like most. His flea market was permanent, was situated in the buildings of an old dairy farm, and featured only one person selling many different things. That one person was Captain Brimm himself. The captain was grandpa age, but didn't have any grandchildren or other family that anyone knew of. He had some hair, but he didn't bother very much with what it did. The hair he had was white. He wore light brown trousers, shirts with white and dark blue stripes, and green suspenders that buttoned to his pants. He described his clothes as practical. Some customers described his clothes as in need of a wash. Captain Brimm's phenomenal flea market filled all the corners and nooks and window sills of a large cow barn where the cows used to be kept. He had more items in the milking parlor where the cows used to be milked, and still more flea market material in the milk house where the milk used to be separated from the cream and made ready for shipping. It was a large, crowded, and untidy flea market which made it wonderful, in the opinion of Oscar D. Doggety, whose family vacationed each summer at a lake near Captain Brimm's. Oscar was 8 years old, with dark framed glasses and a respectful attitude toward grandpa types. He loved being around Captain Brimm and the flea market. They both fascinated him. The flea market was too much to get used to. Oscar D. Doggety never, ever got bored. He couldn't wait to go exploring and find new areas he hadn't seen before. There were boxes and bags and bins of everything imaginable, and a lot that he couldn't have imagined. Some of the material in the flea market was modern, like bicycles and electric blenders the captain bought at garage sales. Most of the material was old or forgotten. Depending upon who was talking, the old stuff was either junk or antique. There were smells of mold and canvas and damp newspapers and dust and hay, and behind all the other smells was a smell of cows. Some people, after leaving the premises, said that the old poop smelled too. Oscar never knew if they were talking about cow manure or if they were talking about Captain Brimm. The old gentleman did smell, but Oscar didn't think he smelled bad. Of course, Oscar didn't think that rain-soaked dogs or pollywog ponds smelled bad either. No, not bad. Oscar thought the captain smelled, well, comfortable. That was it. Comfortable with himself and his life, and with friends like Oscar D. Doggety. Captain Brimm's phenomenal flea market wasn't busy very often. Oscar liked it best when he and the captain were alone. That was when he could ask the captain questions. "What's this?" Oscar asked. The captain looked up from where he sat behind a glass and wood counter. He looked over the top of a 20-year-old newspaper he was reading and said, "That's a potato ricer." "What's it do?" "People used to stick cooked potatoes in the cup part, then squeeze that handle, and the potato would squirt out through all the little holes." Oscar thought and asked, "Why didn't they just mash the potatoes like we do today?" "Because they taste better when you use a potato ricer." "Why?" Oscar asked. "It's a mystery, and mysteries make some things better," Captain Brimm told him, and went back to reading his newspaper. "What's this?" "A corn sheller." "What's this?" "A mole trap." "This?" "Chinese finger cuffs." "This?" "An ammo pouch." "This?" "My lunch. Want some?" "Only if you have enough, Captain." "Oscar D. Doggety, I always have enough for you." Oscar and the captain got along just fine. They were honest with each other and didn't laugh or get disgusted when they shared the truth. "Are you happy, Oscar?" the captain once asked. "Sure. How about you?" "I'll tell you something, my young friend. I am indeed happy." "Why?" "I'm happy," the old man explained, because I have a generous amount of baby powder in my BVDs. I have found that life is much more pleasant if you attend to basic comforts, such as the avoidance of chafing. Observe." Captain Brimm stood up and patted the seat of his pants with both hands. Sunshine from the barn windows highlighted the sparkling cloud of baby powder that puffed from the captain's pants. Oscar was impressed. This was a sort of advice he could use. There was one subject that Captain Brimm was not open about. It was his electric fans. He acted strange about his fans, and he wasn't willing to tell Oscar why. Oscar had tried to find out about the fans in many ways. He had hinted. He had asked directly. He had beaten around the bush. He had even spied on Captain Brimm from behind piles of duffel bags. It wasn't any good. Oscar couldn't figure out what it was about fans and the captain. It was the captain's intense interest in fans that first made Oscar D. Doggety curious. He noticed how his old friend got excited when he acquired another fan. The captain couldn't wait to sit down behind the glass and wood counter with a fan blowing over himself. He would lean back with his chair tilted against the barn wall, place a fairly clean handkerchief over his face, and be still. "Why do you do that?" Oscar asked. "Shh." Oscar waited. The captain sometimes took a few minutes, and sometimes took much longer, as if he had fallen asleep. He did something else if he took a long time with a particular fan. He would turn it around so it blew away from him. The captain was very picky about how he positioned the fan. Then he would sit several feet away and squint at it for many minutes. When the strange examination was over, Captain Brimm either put a price tag on the fan or carried it up a ladder and into the old hayloft. The fans that went up the ladder were never sold. Oscar couldn't stand not knowing. "Why won't you tell me about the fans?" Oscar asked. "Because I want to be honest with you, Oscar. I could tell you a story, and you might believe it, and then you would stop pestering me about it, but I would feel badly because I had not been honest. I'd rather not tell you at all instead of lying. You can't argue with an answer like that, at least not at first." Eventually, though, Oscar couldn't stand it again, and he pleaded, "Captain, would you at least tell me a story about why you do what you do with the fans? I'll know it isn't true, so you won't really be fibbing." "Are you sure?" the captain asked seriously. "Kind of." "Okay, here's my story version. I have those fans blowing over me so I can tell if they will do a good job of cooling someone. I don't want to sell any fans that don't cool properly." "Why the handkerchief over your face?" Oscar asked. "I'm blocking out my visual sense at that point. I want to hear and feel the fan. Later, when I turn the fan around, I use my visual sense to see how pleasing the fan is to the eye. Being pleasing to the eye is an important quality for a fan." "Really?" Oscar asked. "No," the captain answered. "Feel better?" "No." "Didn't think you would," Captain Brimm told the boy. They sat for a while, not feeling very comfortable. This wasn't how they usually interacted with each other, and they didn't know how to behave. Oscar looked up into the rafters of the barn. He pulled his upper lip into his mouth, stuck out his jaw, and tapped his lower teeth up against his stretched lip. The captain leaned back in his chair and stared absent-mindedly at the spider webs in the corners of the dusty windows. He pushed out his bottom denture and wiggled it up and down. They didn't talk or look at each other. They looked odd. They felt odd. Finally, the captain let his chair fall forward, placed his hands on his thighs, and leaned toward Oscar. "Okay, Oscar, I'll tell you, but things won't ever be the same again. Do you want that?" What would you have said? Things had been going so well up to this part about the fans. Oscar thought for a little bit and sadly answered, "It doesn't seem like things will be the same anyway. I'm afraid I've soured our relationship." Captain Brimm smiled fondly at Oscar. "Kid, you're growing up too fast. I probably should have told you about the fans a long time ago. It might have slowed down your aging process. I get worried when I hear you use phrases like soured our relationship. That's way too complicated for us. Here's the real story. The captain then described something remarkable to Oscar. He explained how there might just be a chance that some fans had a little magic. Oh, the captain went on, maybe magic isn't the right word. Maybe some fans just have something special. But whatever it is, I think I can pick out the ones that have it. How? Oscar asked. This was fascinating. First, I listen to them. With a handkerchief over your face, Oscar stated. It seems to help. I don't know why. Maybe it's the way the corners tickle my ears and cheeks when they flap. Anyway, I listen first. What do you listen for? The captain didn't answer right away. He seemed embarrassed. I listen for almost voices, Captain Brimm said quietly. Oscar's eyebrows went up with surprise. He didn't blink for a long time as he looked at his old friend. Oscar looked so silly that the captain chuckled before he went on. Laddie, you are a sight. If your eyebrows went any further away from your eyes, they would slide down into your collar. I didn't say voices, I said almost voices. There is a difference. See, with some fans, there's just a hint of something in the whoosh and swish and hum they make. I first noticed it when I had a fan in my bedroom window on a hot night. I was slipping off to sleep, and I thought or dreamed that I could just barely hear something that sounded like voices. It was coming from the fan. Oscar's eyes opened wider. He felt a shiver, and it wasn't chilly in the barn. This was spooky. In a whisper, Oscar asked, What did the voices say? Were they calling to you? Oh, no, the captain said impatiently. There wasn't anything scary about it. I couldn't make out anything at all. It just sort of kind of sounded like voices. It was probably just the speed of the blades and the pitch of the motor and the direction of the wind combining to make a noise that vaguely, very vaguely, sounded like somebody saying the same thing over and over. Oscar shook himself as if ice water had spilled down his back and said, I bet you couldn't get to sleep after that. Sure I could. I found it all very soothing, like a friend was keeping me company. Best sleep I ever had. Oscar looked around, trying to think of something to say. He asked, What about when you turn the fan around and look at it? What are you doing then? Sometimes I think I see faces in the whirling blades. Isn't that a crazy idea? Faces? Not very often, and you have to get the backlighting just right. It probably isn't anything. Forget I told you about it. It's just a lot of silliness. Forget it, Oscar said. Are you kidding? Do you feel better now that I've shared my secret with you, or do you think I'm nuts? Oscar walked to the old man and put his arm around the captain's shoulder, saying, I don't think you're nuts, Captain Brimm, but I don't think you're normal either. That's why I like you. They smiled at each other. They were comfortable friends again. Captain, Oscar started to ask as he stood by the old man and looked into his eyes, which fans do you sell and which fans do you put in the hayloft? Hello, somebody shouted from the barn door. It startled both the old man and the boy. Hello, Captain Brimm called back. A man in bib overalls and a baseball hat stepped into the barn from the bright outdoors and opened his eyes wide to see in the dim light. He had something in a burlap bag. Hi, Ralph, Captain Brimm greeted the man. Got something of interest? Maybe, maybe not, Ralph said, and placed his bundle on top of the glass and wood counter. You've asked me to keep my eye out for this sort of thing, and since my sister was just going to throw it away, I gave her $1 and brought it to you. Captain Brimm glanced at Oscar. Oscar could see he was very interested. The captain pulled the burlap bag off the object. It was a beautiful old fan. The wire guard was made of pleasingly bent wires that squiggled back and forth like lazy Z's. The fan housing was painted in glossy black enamel. There were designs of ferns and deer drawn in gold on the shiny background. The base was made of cast iron and worked with figures of pine trees and birds and bears. It's an oscillating fan, and it still works, Ralph said. The captain's mouth opened as if to say, "Oh," but he didn't make a sound. "Want to plug it in?" Ralph asked, reaching for the cord. The captain shook his head back and forth rapidly. He pulled a small fold of money from his shirt pocket and started to offer Ralph a $5 bill, then pulled it back before Ralph could accept it. The captain replaced the $5 bill with a $20 bill and gave it to Ralph. Ralph looked at the $20 bill and then at the captain. He asked, "Are you sure, Captain? You've never paid me this much before." "Ralph," the captain said, coming around the counter to walk the man to the door, "you have done me a great favor. This looks like an exceptional fan, and I am delighted to have it. If you say it works, it works. I trust you completely. Don't trip on the door sill. Bye-bye. Say hello to Mrs. Ralph for me. Ta-ta." Ralph was barely out the door when the captain scooted back to the counter. The fan wasn't where he had left it. He looked around quickly and saw that Oscar had put it over to the side, where the captain placed his fans for their test. Oscar had also leaned 2 chairs back against the barn wall. He was sitting in one of them. "It's all plugged in and ready to go," Oscar said happily. "Got enough handkerchiefs so I could borrow one?" "Oscar D. Doggety, I always have enough for you." The captain reached under the counter and pulled out a clean, folded handkerchief for Oscar. He pulled his own out of his back pocket and went to the fan. "Ready?" the captain asked. "Ready," Oscar said, and wiggled a little with excitement. Captain Brimm turned on the fan. He fussed with it to make sure that the back-and-forth oscillation blew evenly over the 2 chairs, then sat down next to Oscar and covered his face with the handkerchief. Oscar unfolded his handkerchief and did the same. Oscar asked, "Which fans do you keep and which do you sell?" The captain said, "Shh." Oscar thought for a long time as they listened to the fine old fan. He decided not to ask again. Maybe a little mystery does make things better. The end.